winter of 1943 was one of the harshest on record. The biting cold, the relentless snow, and the unyielding darkness made the war seem even more brutal. The Allies had received intelligence, but a hidden German outpost in the remote village of St. Agnes. Located deep within the Black Forest of Germany, the mission was simple: infiltrate, gather intelligence, and eliminate the threat. However, the reality of the mission would prove far more terrifying than any of the soldiers could have imagined. Lieutenant James Caldwell was chosen to lead the mission, a seasoned officer with countless successful missions under his belt. Caldwell was known for his tactical brilliance and unwavering resolve. His team consisted of 6 men: Sergeant William Bill Turner, Corporal Samuel Sam Hayes, Privates Thomas Tom Dawson, Robert Bob Thompson, and the brothers, John and Michael Mick O'Reilly. They set off on a cold December morning, their breath visible in the icy air. The forest was eerily silent, the only sound being the crunch of snow under their boots. The deeper they ventured, the darker it became, the towering trees blocking out the scant sunlight. For hours of trekking, they finally arrived at St. Agnes, a village seemingly abandoned and frozen in time. The village had a sinister aura. The houses, though intact, were dark and empty. The church, which stood in the center, had its doors wide open as if inviting them in. Caldwell decided to make the church their base of operations. As they entered, the air grew colder. A sense of dread washed over them. First night was uneventful, but the silence was unnerving. The men took turns keeping watch, the howling wine their only company. As dawn broke, Caldwell ordered a search of the village. They found nothing: no signs of life, no footprints in the snow, and no evidence of an enemy presence. It was as if the village had been abandoned overnight. That night, things took a darker turn. Turner, who was on the first watch, reported hearing whispers coming from the forest, dismissing it as the wind. Caldwell reassured his men, but as the night wore on, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. They spoke in German, words of warning and despair. The next morning, they found Turner missing. His gear was still there, his rifle leaning against the wall, but he was nowhere to be found. A search of the village and the surrounding forest yielded nothing. The men were on edge, fear creeping into their minds. On the third night, the whispers returned, this time accompanied by shadows that moved just beyond the firelight. Caldwell ordered the men to stay close, their rifles at the ready. As the night deepened, the whispers turned into wails, the shadows growing bolder. Suddenly, Mick let out a scream. The men turned to see him being dragged into the darkness by unseen hands. They fired into the void, but it was too late. Mick was gone. Panic set in. The men, trained for combat and hardened by war, were now facing an enemy they couldn't see or understand. Caldwell tried to keep morale up, but the fear was palpable. They decided to fortify the church, barricading the doors and windows. That night, the church was besieged. The wails and whispers were deafening. The shadows pressing against the barricades. Caldwell, clutching his rifle, saw a figure standing at the altar. It was a woman, her eyes hollow, her skin pale and translucent. She began to speak, her voice a chilling whisper. She told them of the village's dark past. During the early days of the war, the villagers had been accused of harboring Allied spies. In retaliation, German soldiers had slaughtered everyone, leaving the bodies to rot. The church had become a place of unspeakable horror, the villagers' spirits trapped in an eternal cycle of torment. As she spoke, the shadows grew closer, the temperature dropping further. The men fired at the shadows, but their bullets had no effect. The woman continued, telling them that the only way to break the curse was to find and bury the bodies, giving the spirits peace. With no other options, Caldwell and his remaining men ventured into the forest the next morning. Guided by the woman's spirit, they found a mass grave, the bodies frozen in time. They spent the day digging, their fingers numb from the cold. As they buried the last body, the forest grew silent, the oppressive darkness lifting. That night, the church was quiet. The whispers were gone, the shadows no longer looming. The men, exhausted and haunted by what they had witnessed, finally slept. At dawn, they left St. Agnes, the village now a ghost town, its dark past buried beneath the snow. Caldwell reported the mission as a success, but he never spoke of the horrors they had faced. The men who survived were forever changed, the shadows of St. Agnes following them long after the war had ended. In the years following the war, Caldwell tried to put the memories of St. Agnes behind him, but the nightmares persisted, vivid and unrelenting. In 1950, 5 years after the war had ended, he received a letter from a German historian named Dr. Friedrich Weber. Dr. Weber had been researching the events in St. Agnes and had uncovered new information. He invited Caldwell to return to the village to help uncover the truth. Haunted by the past and desperate for closure, Caldwell agreed. He reached out to the remaining members of his team. Sam Hayes and Tom Dawson agreed to join him. Despite their own lingering fears, together they made their way back to the Black Forest. The journey to St. Agnes was eerily familiar. The forest seemed unchanged. The shadows as oppressive as ever. When they arrived, they found the village still abandoned, the church standing in silent vigil over the frozen landscape. Dr. Weber greeted them, his eyes filled with curiosity and concern. Dr. Weber led them to the church, where he had set up a makeshift research station. He explained that he had uncovered documents indicating that the massacre in St. Agnes had been part of a larger, darker ritual. The German soldiers, under the command of an SS officer named Heinrich Metzger, had been conducting occult experiments, attempting to summon and control dark forces. As night fell, the familiar whispers began. Dr. Weber, though intrigued, seemed unprepared for the chilling reality of the village's curse. The group decided to investigate the crypt beneath the church, hoping to find more clues. The air grew colder as they descended the stone steps, the flickering candlelight casting long shadows on the walls. In the crypt, they found ancient texts and artifacts, evidence of Metzger's ritualistic practices. The most disturbing discovery was a large, ornate mirror covered in runes. As Caldwell approached, the mirror began to shimmer, showing glimpses of the past. They saw the villagers' final moments, the terror and despair etched on their faces. Suddenly, the mirror shattered, releasing a chilling wind that extinguished their candles. The whispers turned to screams, and shadows began to move around them in the chaos. Caldwell felt a cold hand on his shoulder. Turning, he saw the spectral figure of Heinrich Metzger, his eyes burning with malevolence. Metzger spoke in a guttural voice, condemning them for disturbing his work. He revealed that his spirit was bound to the village, and he sought to complete his dark ritual. Caldwell, Hayes, and Dawson fought to maintain their composure, but the terror was overwhelming. Realizing they needed to break the ritual, Dr. Weber suggested they destroy the artifacts and texts. As they smashed the items, the shadows grew more agitated, the air filled with an unearthly wail. Metzger's spirit lashed out, but the group persevered, determined to end the curse once and for all. In a final, desperate act, Caldwell grabbed a nearby torch and set the remaining artifacts ablaze. The flames roared to life, consuming the dark relics. Metzger's spirit let out a blood-curdling scream before dissipating into the ether. The crypt fell, silent, the oppressive atmosphere lifting. Emerging from the church, they found the village bathed in an eerie, tranquil light. The whispers were gone, the shadows no longer menacing. St. Agnes, it seemed, had finally found peace. Caldwell and his team left the village, their hearts heavy but their spirits lighter. The horrors of St. Agnes would stay with them, but they had faced the darkness and emerged victorious. As they returned to their lives, they carried with them the memory of a place where the past and present had collided, where the shadows of war had given way to a haunting far more terrifying. Years later, Caldwell wrote a memoir detailing the events in St. Agnes. His account, though met with skepticism by many, became a source of fascination for those interested in the supernatural and the occult. Dr. Weber continued his research, publishing several papers on the intersection of war and the paranormal. The village of St. Agnes, though still abandoned, became a place of pilgrimage for those seeking to understand the mysteries of the past. The church, once a place of horror, stood as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the enduring power of courage in the face of darkness, and so the story of St. Agnes lived on, a chilling reminder of the shadows that linger at the edges of our